Building a payment method in Adobe Commerce is not a trivial task. In fact, if you miss a step on either the back end or the front end, the whole thing is probably kaput and it just doesn't work, or you're going to run into some weird issues. Developing these payment methods, again, is challenging. And so in today's Knowledge Bite, we're going to dissect a question as well as several different potential options for an answer, and we're going to determine which one is the right one. Better yet, we're going to dive into the checkout itself to be able to prove which answer we have is correct. Now, let's dive in and see what the question is before we take a look at some of these answers. All right. While working on the offline payment method, my company, Custom Payment, you have implemented elements such as the payment model class, the knockout HTML template, added a JavaScript class, built out all the configurations. However, the payment method has yet to appear on the front end. What step might be missing? Well, this is a very good question because again, this is a very complex issue as you saw by all these things we have to add. Let's see what type of answers we have come up with here. And I'm going to say this real quick. A big shout out to Max Pronko. There, we actually had a slight error in our correct answer, which is not something that I like to do as we posted on social media. But this slight error actually did affect the correct answer's information, even though most everyone still selected it as the correct answer. There was still something, a piece of information that should have been better stated in that. And so I appreciate the call out there. Take a look here at these different answers. A, your component must inject payment initialization into this long render list here. This is initialized in the checkout UI components. B, you need to override the checkout template file and add the payment form into it. C, the implementation points are correct, but something must be wrong inside of this path right here. Very well. Well, as a investigator, as a developer, we need to be able to figure out what is going on. Perhaps we have these three options in front of us. We've worked through the documentation on the Adobe Experience League website. We've reviewed everything. It seems all good, but it just doesn't work. Now, what I always suggest in a situation like this is to go to your development environment that you have configured on your machine and do some research in the code there. How else has it been done? Well, the good news is Adobe had mercy on poor souls like me, and they included some examples of how to actually do this, which makes a world of difference in a situation like this. So here in this case, we have our PayPal module Braintree core module. And what ends up being here is we have the files to power Braintree. Now, Braintree is definitely a bit on the complex side. If you want to look at more of the offline payments, specifically for like was referenced here in this knowledge bite question here, we are going to scroll up here to offline payments, and you'll get a bit more of an abbreviated approach. However, in most cases, it's not going to be offline. So at the end of the day, you probably want to just stick with the Braintree because that's online and probably more in line with a business use case. Either way, we can look at either one of these options. The key components here are as follows. We have a Christmas tree of XML. We do. Yeah. And on the surface, dissecting this seems like a bit of a nightmare, but it's not as bad as you think. In fact, all you have to do is go to the main checkout modules checkout index file, and you can collapse up these different these different nodes here, and you can more or less generate your own tree view yourself, which is kind of a handy way to do it. With that, you can get a picture of how everything fits together. But again, we're using an example here, which makes life a heck of a lot easier. Check this out. So we have our name inside of renders. We have a children offline payments, and we have our component right here, which this component is found. We drop into web.js payment offline payments right here. And you'll notice we have the different methods specified underneath this. And what this does here, this offline payment basically pushes into a renderer list. Well, what's a renderer list? Oh, that's pathetic. It's basically just an observable array. Fantastic. Well, check this out. I pulled this up here in a checkout experience. I pulled up the render list. Well, we can see these renderers already right here and available. We have a component for each one of those. which is then initialized. I actually pulled the component out right here, and you can see what one of these components looks like as well. So don't forget, we have a require if we want to get something that's a component or a class that has already been initialized. This does not work for getting the instance of a currently existing component. This is be like how you can get a singleton, if in programmatic terms, a singleton here for to see again the list of values that are available. Or you can use the UI registry, filter by the index, whatever. You can pull out the actual name as we see right here. That works as well. Basically, you get the index. The index is listed right here. You can also just find that index in, I'm going a little off script here, in the item name of offline payment. So you can see this is the name right here. That would be also considered the index. So you can see it from this perspective, how it's been initialized, as well as this type of configuration, which then leads to initializing this component, which then enables the initialization of the child component. And I believe that might actually be the second one listed right here. This should be, yes, this is the child component. So basically the way this works, let me zoom out a little bit, is inside of our, inside of here, we have our component. We have our renders. Then we have our component, and then underneath our component, kind of underneath our components, initialized through the renderer list, we then have each individual renderer. So we have like a list of our render UI component. Then we have our parent of initialization component initialization, and then inside of there we have each one of these individual methods there. So with that background in mind, again, a 30-mile high tour of how payments are initialized in the checkout, let's jump back here and take a look at our available answer. I think we're going to have one stand out pretty quickly. So if we look at the question again, we have implemented our payment model. That's backend knockout HTML template. We didn't talk about that, but that's pretty simple. Added a JavaScript class, built out all configurations. In the most basic terms, we should have added 2 JavaScript classes. That's really the summation of what we're missing here. Take a look here at this answers. Your component must inject payment initialization into this renderer list. Again, payment initialization is a little bit broad. Basically, it's a type and a component, as we see right here, but it's payment initialization. This is initializing the checkout UI components. So this is here and available. I would say the answer right now is A, but let's look on to B. B, there's no checkout file template. This is like referring back to Magento 1 days. That's not an issue. Implementation points are correct, but something must be wrong inside our method renderer. Now, remember, our method renderer, there could be something wrong inside of there. Don't get me wrong. But the key point is we missed a very critical step here, and that is we missed point A. We missed adding it into this renders list. Thus, the correct answer is A. And again, shout out to Max Pronko for noticing how this was slightly different than it should have been. So I hope you found this helpful as an overview of how to initialize a payment method here in Adobe Commerce.